All right. Yesterday we talked about players, groups of three, and who had the highest ceiling, the most upside in those groups. Today, who has the safest floor? So, yeah, I'm on the clock. I just don't want to pick a terrible player here. I don't want to have a bust on my hands here. So who's got the safest floor? We've got four groups of three players. And we have your emails today at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. And it feels like it's been a week since I have talked to Heath Cummings. Welcome back to the show, Heath. It has been a week since I've talked to you, I think. What's up?
Yeah. It's I was a little under the weather on Thursday, I think, or maybe it was Wednesday and I wasn't on Thursday's show, but then went and coached some basketball in Orlando, but I'm back. Did FFT Dynasty yesterday. Ready to talk about floors.
Yeah. And I was disappointed because when you sent the text message to all of us, it said you weren't feeling well. I was about to type feel better, and then Dave put it like a second before me. And then it looked like I was just piggybacking on Dave, but I genuinely meant feel better, Heath. So I hope you are feeling better.
I am feeling, I don't, I'm at the age now where I never get to 100%, but I'm feeling better.
Okay, good. All right, we got some news and notes. Jamie's here as well. Dave will hop on shortly. And we've got the safest floors and then your emails. So let's start with the news and notes. James Cook missed the first day of OTAs for the Bills. And yeah, we are hoping no holdout for him. Holdouts are bad. And he's not, may not see him till training camp, but he needs he wants a new contract. So James Cook missed the first day of OTAs for the Bills. And also Joey Bosa, who they brought in this offseason, he is out until training camp with a calf injury, pass rusher now for Buffalo. Chad Graff of The Athletic thinks that Stephon Diggs could be ready by week 4. Jamie, your take on the New England pass catchers right now?
I mean, at this point, I'm kind of expecting to be ready for week 1. The fact that he's practicing in OTAs with no knee brace, that's a pretty good sign. So, look, I understand being optimistic or cautiously optimistic with him. 31 years old, coming off the ACL tear, still getting used to a new team. So, how much do you want to make sure that he's up to speed with everything that they're doing? But I'm kind of operating as he's going to be an older receiver coming off an injury, but ready for week 1 and probably still going to be the best receiver on his team. So a low end number 3, high end number 4 receiver.
Okay. And Kirk Cousins missed the first day of OTAs. And that's not really a surprise. We'll see where he ends up. Probably Atlanta. Heath, what's coming up on FFT Dynasty this week?
I've got Jacob Gibbs coming back on Friday, and we're going to talk about some of our rankings discrepancies regarding the rookies. He's got his rankings list out. I've got my rankings list out. I think we both updated them since that early May ranking, and we're going to talk about some guys that he likes more than I do and guys that I like more than he does, and see if we can convince each other.
Very cool. Looking forward to it. Check out FFT Dynasty. The episodes, most of them drop in the FFT feed, but if you want a separate feed, Fantasy Football Today Dynasty, just look it up. You'll find it. All right. First trio of players. The guys made fun of me for putting Tyreek Hill in the notes again. He's the only player that appeared on yesterday's show that will also be discussed on today's show. But I'm going to put Tyreek Hill in there, 31-year-old Tyreek Hill, with 2 up-and-coming players, Ladd McConkey in his second year, Jaxon Smith-Njigba in his third year, who has, what's his safest floor? The safest floor. If you want a little peek behind the curtain. Forget it. But I kind of screwed over Thomas this morning. So if you see any discrepancies in the graphics, it's my fault. Ladd McConkey, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Tyreek Hill. Who has the safest floor? Heath Cummings, what do you think?
Not Tyreek Hill. I was really prepared to talk about how I didn't like his floor. No, I think the safest floor is probably Ladd McConkey for me.
Okay, Ladd McConkey, JSN, Tyreek Hill. Adamantly, he says it's not Tyreek Hill who has the safest floor. Jamie, what do you think?
I would go with McConkey as well. I agree with Heath. I don't think Tyreek Hill has the safest floor of these guys as things are currently standing for their respective teams.
Why McConkey over JSN? Do you know how much I struggle with McConkey over JSN? I think about it. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think about it in the shower. And Jerry Jones once talked about that, right? You do some really good thinking in the shower. Remember, he was talking about that, I think, with like one of the contracts. I don't remember who it was. And it's true. You're just sitting there alone with your thoughts. And
I've heard
I have
people
to
say
say-
that before, and I mostly just think about washing and rinsing and getting out. I don't spend that much time in the shower.
Yeah, I do. It's like when you have little kids. I mean, it's the only time it's quiet for you. You know, it's just leave me alone. I'm in the shower. So I think about fantasy football and Lad McConkey versus JSN. Really, I struggle with it. But this is just the floor. Well, first of all, I guess who do you guys have ranked higher, McConkey or JSN?
McConkey.
McConkey by one spot, but to me, they're very similar in their profiles.
And what do you think about in the shower? No. Why did you guys pick McConkey with a safer floor than JSN?
Go ahead. I'm more worried about Cooper Kupp than I am Trey Harris. I'm a lot more worried about Sam Darnold than I am Justin Herbert.
There's changes for JSN. There's really not much different for Lad McConkey.
Yeah. Okay. McConkey was the number 19 wide receiver per game with only 82 catches, only 112 targets in 16 games. He was so good with those targets, though. In his last 10 games, though, McConkey was the number 11 wide receiver per game, on pace for 1,500 yards on 124 targets. All right, so let me make the case for Tyreek Hill. He was 30 last year. I think we've established at this point, elite wide receivers, like 30 is not old, right? So I just cannot look at Tyreek Hill's last season and be like, he's washed up. He was washed up last year. Doesn't make any sense for him to be basically the best wide receiver in football at age 28 and age 29, and then be 33rd per game in PPR. And he played a full 17 games and didn't even reach 1,000 yards. There's something else there. And he obviously had a preseason wrist injury, bothered him all year. He is the best receiver in this trio. He might still be the best receiver in the NFL. It might sound crazy, but he's right up there. Tyreek Hill is safer than you think, fellas. And he's going to be one of my favorite picks, by the way, if I can get him in the third round. So my case for him is that everything we saw last year was just the wrist injury. He's about to bounce back.
Well, the offense completely changed.
Because of his wrist injury.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard for me to say that when he still played every single game and they threw him the 120 balls. Like, I know we've seen good veteran wide receivers at 31 for sure. I wonder how many of them have been healthy, in air quotes, because he played the entire season, have played the entire season at age 30 and seen their receiving yards drop 800 yards and then still be elite at 31.
I did find a few wide receivers. This was not an easy exercise to do, right? But I found a few wide receivers who struggled late in their career and then bounced back. Reggie Wayne, Hines Ward, Randy Moss come to mind. And they did that at even later than 31. So Reggie Wayne Reggie Wayne's a great example, but he wasn't nearly as bad as Tyreek Hill. But he went from wide receiver 5 per game at age 29 to 14 per game at age 30, back to wide receiver 5 per game at age 31. Hines Ward was kind of bad, it looked like, from age 29, 30, and 31. He just wasn't so great. And then he went over 1,000 yards. He had great years at age 32 and 33. Randy Moss, wide receiver 14 at age 31, and then wide receiver 2 at age 32. So those are just a few examples of guys who had bounce back years. Tyreek Hill would have more to bounce back from. But this is my last stat on Tyreek Hill. In 11 games with Tua, he was on pace for 134 targets. Now, that's a far cry from what he did the previous 2 years, which was probably, I'm guessing, around 180 targets. I don't remember off the top of my head, but he had 100.
I think it was 170 and 172, so I think it was a 171 average, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so 10 a game. So 134 targets was his pace with Tua in 11 games last year. That's more than what McConkey had. Guessing that's more than what JSN had. I don't know if you have that in front of you. He had 137 targets in 17 games. So if they all got the same amount of targets, who do you think you'd rank highest? JSN, Hill, or McConkey?
The same amount of targets?
Yeah, let's say they were all getting the same amount of targets.
McConkey.
Okay, so you really don't expect Tyreek Hill to go back to being elite per target?
I'm still hopeful because of what we saw the first 2 years in Miami, the first 2 years or the 2 years you discussed. And I don't think he's completely washed up. I agree with that sentiment. But to Heath's point, the offense did change. I don't think it changed because of Tyreek Hill's wrist injury. I think it changed because of Tua and the concern of the offensive line and making sure that he's going to be, upright and safe. And, coming off a year where we missed 6 games, due to not just the concussion, but also the hip injury, I don't see them going back to necessarily a less rhythm, on schedule type of offense. I think that's really what the goal is, to get the ball out of his hands quickly. And that's not going to be to Tyreek Hill's benefit from an upside play. And so, to sort of marry the two shows that we've done this week, I think in terms of upside, if you want to put him in the same category as the other 2 receivers we discussed yesterday, so probably has more upside than all 4 of those guys. But in terms of the floor, I think just looking at it, like, we've seen what the floor is, and it's ugly. And, you can't guarantee at this point, 2 of the last 3 years, 2 has been hurt. Can't guarantee that he's going to go back to being that guy. Who knows how much of the wrist injury is still bothering him. He's still having off-season, procedures done. Hopefully he's past it, but still could be a lingering issue. And for the most part, yes, 32 is kind of the fall-off age. But, Heath has brought this up, that once these guys start to get a little older and they start to show you that things are going wrong, it's hard to reverse the trend and say that they get back to being elite level or getting to elite level production. So I think drafting him in round 3 still makes some sense because the upside's there. Drafting him in round 2 is a little bit concerning. Your statement yesterday is still very valid. I think between him and Christian McCaffrey, they're the 2 most fascinating, people to discuss this year because of what the upside still can be for them. But we also may be seeing the end of the run for both of those elite level producers, and it might have been the case for Tyreek Hill, not necessarily just completely injury related last year.
Yeah, I just want to bring this up because you talk about Tua getting the ball out. We keep saying the Dolphins' offense changed, and I think what you guys are referring to is lower ADOT, more passes to the running backs and the tight end, specifically Achane and Jonnu Smith, right? So this is where Tua has ranked among qualified quarterbacks in time to throw, like how long they're holding the ball before they throw in the last 3 seasons when he's had Tyreek Hill. He's been 3rd to last, he's been dead last, and he's been dead last. He always gets the ball out quickly. He can still throw the ball to his wide receivers and get the ball out quickly. He just has to take more shots downfield. But we talked about that story going into the year where the Dolphins wanted to be less reliant on the explosive play and they wanted to control the ball a little bit more, keep their defense off the field. And they dinked and dunked. My opinion, it's just an opinion, it's just a guess, is that Tyreek Hill just wasn't healthy. And that was part of the reason why they didn't throw to him as much. If you want to buy into that theory, then, Tyreek could have a huge bounce back season. Yeah, go ahead.
I just think if you want to bet on an old wide receiver, like Mike Evans and DeVonta Adams are probably going to go after Tyreek Hill.
He's so much better than them.
Both of them scored 17 fantasy points per game last year.
Tyreek Hill scored over 20 2 straight years.
Okay, I understand that. And I think DeVonta Adams probably had a 20-point season as well, or 2. But we saw like Stephon Diggs was better per game than him. Cooper Kupp was 2 points better per game than Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, it's horrible. You just have to buy the injury excuse. I get it if you don't. I don't think you're out of line. I don't think you're wrong.
Well, you can buy the injury excuse and give him a 20% increase in what he did last year, and he's still not as good as most of those guys.
Why do I have to stop at 20? All right, listen, I'm going to get Dave's opinion on this. Dave, who has the safest floor, Lab McConkey, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, or Tyreek Hill? Why don't you tell us and say your first words of the show after this commercial break on FFT?
The most original musical ever is now streaming on Paramount Plus.
I'm just giving the people what they want.
Better Man absolutely sizzles from start to finish.
Wow!
Better Man, now streaming on Paramount Plus.
Dave.
Yeah.
So who's got we'll just give us a quick answer here and we'll move on to our next topic. Who has the safest floor, McConkey, JSN, or Tyreek?
Well, first of all, I just want to say I do my best thinking in the car, not the shower. I'm going to say JSN has the safest floor. I think he's got the best shot to replicate the target volume that we saw last year. And I heard you guys talk about Lab McConkey and how nothing's really changed for him. Something has changed very much for him, and that's the offense in LA. Adding Omarion Hampton, adding Najee Harris. This is a team that's going to run the ball more. And so one of the reasons why I kind of took a step back from Justin Herbert being a top 10 fantasy quarterback in 2025 is because I think they're going to be able to run the ball a lot more often than they did after the start of last season. And that means target volume is going to go down. And I looked it up. Last year, McConkey on the season, 7 targets per game. That's fine. If you just take the games where the Chargers had 20 or more running back runs, there were 8 of them. McConkey averaged 6.5 targets per game. Still had 16 PPR points per game. Scored a lot of touchdowns. That's pretty cool. But in the 9 games where the Chargers had 19 or fewer running back runs, it's 8.2 targets per game. He only had 2 touchdowns. That's weird. 16.4 PPR points per game. I think that JSN can still settle in at around 8 targets per game. He's not as explosive as McConkey. I would still rather draft McConkey, but we're talking safest floor in full PPR. I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba's got it because I don't think he'll be affected. We've already seen him affected by the run game in Seattle, and he's still averaging good numbers there. So I just think he's the safest of the 3.
Okay. By the way, it was Jerry Jones was thinking about bringing Des Bryant back. He was thinking about that in the shower. So, and he admitted to doing his best thinking in the shower. So give it a try, everybody. Okay, next up, who has the safest floor? Breece Hall, Ken Walker, or RJ Harvey? Breece Hall, Ken Walker, or RJ Harvey?
Who you asking?
Walker.
Oh, Dave. It's make up for lost time.
Yeah, sure. I'll stick in Seattle and say Walker. There's a very consistent track record of him when he does get work. He has a good fantasy average. He gets a lot of carries. The exception being obviously if the way he ended last year, he averaged 3.1 yards per carry. And I want to say like his last 9 games, something like that. It might be a little less than that, but it was gross. He was gross last year, except he caught more passes. That was cool. But we've seen his rushing, his attempts per game go down just a little bit each year. His rushing average took a nosedive. I think he can bounce back a little bit and still see around 15 to 17 touches per game. And I feel safest with him compared to Harvey, who wasn't really he wasn't big on our radar leading up in the draft process. And then all of a sudden he lands in Denver and we all lose our minds over RJ Harvey. There's no guarantee that he's going to be great. I love the opportunity for him, but I'd still rather have Kenneth Walker. And then Breece Hall, dude, I looked up how running backs did with Justin Fields over Fields' career, and the numbers aren't good. Breece Hall's better than any running back that Fields has ever worked with. I know the Jets are going to use multiple running backs anyway. Plus, we've already talked about how Justin Fields will take carries on his own. He'll score on his own. I'm trying to get even more. I was never excited about Breece Hall. I'm getting even more nervous about Breece Hall at this point after going back and looking at the track record of running backs with Justin Fields.
Justin Fields, I was trying to explain the stat to Jamie on the phone, and I struggled. But here we go. We'll do it on the air. So I looked at Justin Fields in his career when he's been on the field. Justin Fields touchdowns plus running back touchdowns. So most like a lot of David Montgomery, Najee Harris, Khalil Herbert. Justin Fields had something like 43% of the total touchdowns that he or the running back scored. That is a lot. Does that make sense? That stat?
Way better than when you told me on the phone.
Yeah, well, that was a dress rehearsal. All right, Jamie, you're up. Who's got the safest floor? Breece Hall, Ken Walker, or Harvey? Dave says Walker. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree. I think you just look at Walker's situation. He probably has the toughest competition of this group. So Zach Charbonnet has proven himself to be a very good number 2 running back. Most of his damage is done when Walker's not there, so factor that in. But Harvey should dominate his backfield if things go right. I still think Breece Hall is the best running back for the Jets, despite what Aaron Glenn's planning to do, or at least what he said he's going to do. But you look at what he's done when healthy, and that's hard to overlook. And so his production is, pretty strong. Last year, proved himself to be maybe a better receiver than people thought coming into the NFL, because that was kind of the knock on him coming out of Michigan State, even though I think it was a little bit of a overblown situation. But look, Harvey's got to prove himself still. You know, as Dave said, you know, he wasn't one of the more touted rookies coming into the draft process, but certainly somebody that, you know, we were kind of waiting to see where he would end up. And as Dave alluded to, he ended up in a great spot. And Breece Hall's, you know, track record so far has been great. You know, even prior to DeVonta Adams joining the Jets last year, was doing everything we were hoping he was going to do. And then just things tailed off. And then I just don't understand their process. But Walker is my favorite of this group to draft. And I think he's the safest. I think he has the highest ceiling and the safest floor of this trip.
Yeah, and I don't think you draft any of these three running. I mean, I don't draft a lot of players after round one, really worried too much about their floor, but I don't think you draft any of these three running backs based on floor. You're drafting them based on the upside, and there's big upside. I thought there was a good comment in the chat. Beemore said Harvey doesn't have a floor, and the Sean Payton selection, the Alvin Kamara comparisons, like that's really exciting, but it's all about ceiling. I looked this morning at running backs drafted since 2000 between pick 50 and pick 70. Harvey was the 60th pick. Between pick 50 and pick 70, there have been 45 running backs drafted since 2000. 6 of them have averaged 10 fantasy points per game.
Oh,
It's gross.
One of them averaged 15.
Can I bring up one quick thing about that? Do you think that running backs are viewed the same way, let's say in the last four drafts compared to the drafts prior to the last 4 drafts?
Maybe not, but 3 of them were drafted that high in the last 4 drafts.
Okay.
James Cook, who scored 84 fantasy points for the season, Zach Charbonnet, who scored 73, and Trey Benson, who scored 41.
And all 3 of them were drafted into timeshares, where we kind of Heath, you know, I remember how we felt about Charbonnet going to Seattle. In the moment it happened, we both thought they were nuts. But this is a different situation with Harvey. I don't think he's going there to split a third and a third and a third with Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime, unless he absolutely sucks at camp. And then, yeah, that's going to happen. You're wasting your pick. But I think he's talented. I'm not ready to say that he's going to be this slam dunk rookie. He's nowhere near Genty and Hampton as far as I'm concerned. No.
Who are the 6 that were good?
I'm pulling it up right now. Nope, I already closed it out, so I'll have to look that back up.
Go to your history.
Not sure where it went.
so are you guys rank it? You're up on the clock. You're going Walker over Hall and then Harvey. Is that how you rank
Yes.
it? Walker.
That's
Hall,
how
Harvey?
Currently, Harvey may go ahead of Hall by the time we get to camp.
Okay. All right, let's go to our next trio here. Who has the most, the safest floor? Who has the safest floor here? Now it's 2 tight ends and a running back, and they're all being drafted in round 2 in our drafts. So it's Trey McBride. That's for the most part. I actually, full disclosure, McBride went in the 3rd round of our most recent draft. I think to Heath, that was a great pick. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Jonathan Taylor. I know it's kind of a weird trio, but Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, Jonathan Taylor, who has the safest floor of these 3? Jamie, why don't you start?
Man, it's a tough one. I'm gonna say McBride. You know, if the touchdowns can ever increase, he's going to be the number 1 tight end. And the target opportunity has been there for basically the last 2 years. Everything really, aside from the touchdowns, has been there the last 2 years. I'm hoping for a better year from Marvin Harrison Jr., but I still think, again, like we talked about yesterday, he's going to be the number 1 target getter on this team. I don't want to say that a running back is probably safer than 2 guys like this at their position. So as good as Taylor has been, he's also been somewhat injury prone in the last 3 years. And I have McBride ranked ahead of Bowers based on what I think is going to happen for him. So give me a McBride of this trio.
Heath, who's the safest here? Bowers, McBride, or Jonathan Taylor?
I'd probably say McBride too. I think all 3 of these guys have fantastic floors. I don't see very much risk at all for them. Like, even if Bowers and McBride lose 20 targets from last year, they're very likely to score 15 fantasy points per game. And Taylor, we worry about the receptions with Anthony Richardson, but he's averaged more than 20 rush attempts per game in the games he's played with Anthony Richardson, and he's always been an efficient rusher. So I don't really see a downside for any of these guys, but I'll go with McBride as the highest floor.
I do think Taylor averaged about 1 target per game with Richardson. That's like start
1.5. Yeah. That's bad, but if you're going to run for 1,500 yards, you've still got a pretty good floor. And I think if he plays 17 games with Anthony Richardson, he's going to run for 1,500 yards.
Dave, who's got the safest floor, Bowers, McBride, or Taylor?
I'll take McBride. I think he's and that's in PPR. I think if we turn this conversation to half PPR or not PPR, I might lean toward Taylor, but I think McBride's just the safest overall. I think his role is absolutely locked in. I think he's still going to see 8.5 plus targets per game. That's really rare for a tight end to get anywhere. I think he's earned it in Arizona. His touchdown production is nowhere to go but up. And he stands out as like a really safe quality PPR pick. I worry a little bit about Bowers suffering from the same thing that McConkey could suffer from. Raiders drafted Ashton Genty, and not only can Genty suck up all the carries, he's a pass catcher too. Jack Bech deserves some credit for being added to that receiving core. Jacoby Myers is still there. Is Bowers going to get 8.7 targets per game again? I worry a little bit about that number coming down, and I really worry about it coming down to like 7. And we're drafting him neck and neck with McBride. So I love Bowers. I especially loved him last year. I took him a ton. But this year, I don't know if I'm going to take him at all unless I can get him like at a really good value. That's like late round 3. And I don't think he's going to last that long.
Never.
Interesting. Never. Does anybody think that anyone in this trio, McBride, Bowers, Jonathon, Taylor, has a low floor? Could be a bust.
I think there's potential for Bowers. I hate to say it. I'm not ranking
so
him
good.
out of my top 40.
Yeah, he is so good, dude. Like he's so good.
I know it. I absolutely know it. But last year's Raiders offense didn't have anybody else besides Myers and Bowers. The talent is amazing. They're changing this year. It's gonna be different. And so I certainly don't want to reach for Brock Bowers. I'll leave it at that. If I get him I'll amend what I said before. If I can get him at a fair value, I'll take him because I want.
You don't have to be a draft I'm not in.
Well, I got a question for you, Dave, because you do say that a lot, and I know what you mean. But can you explain what you mean by I don't want to reach for him, I want him at a fair value? Because some people might be going, well, yeah, obviously. But I guess there are guys that you're willing to reach for. But what do you mean?
There's going to be a guy in every draft this year in home leagues that reaches for Brock Bowers. There's going to be a guy that reaches at least one for McBride, too. We want these guys. They're difference makers at tight end. We're looking for the next Travis Kelce. So I get it. But I can't look at Brock Bowers and say, yeah, he's going to get 9 targets per game again. He's going to have 15.5 PPR points per game again. Yeah, I can't say those same things about him like I said about McBride. I think McBride is a lot safer in that regard. If I'm expecting one of those two to repeat what they've done, it's McBride. Because I don't think his offense hasn't changed at all. There's literally nothing different with the Cardinals offense as far as skill position players go. The Raiders added a big piece in Genty, and they, saying Jack Bech is a big addition is a lie. It's not that big of an addition, but it's another set of hands, and he was pretty good last year at TCU.
Yeah, they also added Geno Smith.
And
that's what I was going to say.
Now they are going to be more run heavy.
Going to be good for the run game.
Last year they had the 4th most pass attempts in football or something like that. So they are going to definitely be more run heavy. I brought this up, and the last 2 tight ends who had these great rookie seasons, they disappointed us. Kyle Pitts, I would consider it a great rookie season. It wasn't great for fantasy, but at the time he set the rookie record for yards. He only had 2 touchdowns, I think. And then Laporta, they both took a step back. But it's kind of interesting sides of this discussion. All right, I like it. Good debate. Let's go to our next one here. Let's go to our last one. Which player in this trio has the safest floor? 3 wide receivers that might start going off the board around late round 4, maybe. DeVonta Smith, Calvin Ridley, and Jerry Jeudy. Who has the safest floor? Heath, you can start. DeVonta Smith, Calvin Ridley, or Jerry Jeudy?
There's not a safest floor on the screen. I'm not sure there's a floor on the screen. If I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. but I don't even know how, like, you almost just have to argue against the other two guys as having even lower floors, because I don't think that there's anybody on this screen that's guaranteed to score 11 PPR fantasy points per game.
DeVonta Smith, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy. I'll give you, I mean, the number on that I have on DeVonta Smith is that 28 games over the last 3 years with Dallas Goedert, he has averaged about 13 points per game. So
last year it was 9.
Last year they barely threw. I mean, you
And
can
they won the
really
Super Bowl.
argue that Barkley just killed DeVonta Smith last year. And they did win the Super Bowl. Yeah, did they win? Yeah, they did win the Super Bowl. Yeah, so 28 regular season games with both A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, 13.1 PPR fantasy points per game, which isn't that good. That's DeVonta Smith. That would have made him wide receiver 31 per game last year. You take out 2 games, by the way, with Gardner Minshew, and it goes down to 12 PPR fantasy points per game because he had big games, huge games with Gardner Minshew. And 12 PPR fantasy points per game would have been wide receiver 39 per game in 2024. All right, so Heath is saying that Jerry Jeudy has the safest floor out of Smith, Ridley, and Jeudy. Jamie, what say you?
I would say Smith, just based on the numbers you just gave. And obviously, there's Heath said it best. There's flaws with all 3 of these guys, just given the circumstances. Jeudy could easily have Dylan Gabriel as his quarterback for the majority of the season, which would be terrifying. Ridley may not benefit from a Cam Ward bump and may still be, struggling with a young quarterback who can't, process things in the NFL. I don't think that'll be the case like Will Levis, but you never know. But Smith, at least what you're getting. And I do think he'll be closer to the 13 than he will the 9 in terms of his production. So in terms of floor, I think it's Smith, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Oh, wow. Okay, so DeVonta Smith for Jamie, Jerry Jeudy for Heath. Dave, who's got the safest floor?
I think it's Jeudy. I don't feel good saying it. It's based on him being the target leader for the Browns. And even if the targets aren't great targets, he should still catch a lot of them. And I think he deserves credit for last year, Adam. He made a bunch of plays after the catch. He made a bunch of plays, period. And so Jeudy to me is probably the one who he and Njoku are going to be like the staples of that passing game, obviously. And they're going to be the ones that see the most targets. Jeudy will work a little further downfield. And he's the one that I think can deliver safe production week in and week out. Whereas with DeVonta, the deal is simple. Like once somebody's missing from Goddard or A.J. Brown, yeah, he flies out off the track and he's awesome. But you got to wait for that to happen.
I'm surprised, Dave, at your answer, just given the fact that 2 guys that we've talked about already, you brought up the run game being better for their teams.
Sure.
And the Browns' run game should be significantly better than it was a year ago.
I get what you're saying. Fair point. I don't know if Judkin's impact on the Browns is going to be the same as Hampton plus Najee in LA and Genty in Las Vegas.
Oh, you think Najee's an upgrade over Dobbins?
What happened?
You think Najee's an upgrade over Dobbins?
He's going to play. He's available. So in that regard, yes. And Dobbins might be there. Remember, they tendered him. So Dobbins could end up being there. He might overtake Najee on the depth chart. So then it's Hampton and Dobbins. That's still a great running back room. It's a better running back room in LA than it is in Cleveland.
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but I think the Browns running back room this year is dramatically better than it was a year ago.
Oh, I think you're right.
I'm not really feeling great about drafting these guys. DeVonta Smith, Calvin Ridley, and Jerry.
Well, Jeudy is the upside play, and that's not close. Like, if he's with, hopefully, Joe Flacco, I mean, look, he could be great with any of the quarterbacks, based on what we saw, last year. Obviously, Jameis is a difference maker for a lot of wide receivers based on his track record. But, look, Jeudy, to Dave's point, I know Heath would agree that he's going to get funnel targets. That's awesome. You can counter with, okay, the first 3 games of Noah Amari Cooper, Cedric Tillman was pretty, special as well. But that's just the best sample size of his career is 3 games. So Jeudy, you talked about this, Adam. I don't remember which show it was, but what he did a couple times in Denver when it started to show flashes, despite poor quarterback play, has that potential if he could stay healthy. So upside versus floor, it's a totally different conversation. I think Jeudy could be, top 15 wide receiver, maybe even top 10. We saw it those stretch of games last year, and Ridley may not be far behind. Look, if Cam Ward is that much of a upgrade over Will Levis, and Ridley is going to also get funnel targets. Look at this receiving core; it's awful. So, but to me, the floor is Smith. The ceiling favors the other two.
Okay, let's take a break. And we got your emails when we come back. So your emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. If you haven't, I didn't put any Apple Podcast questions, and I try to get some Apple Podcast questions in on tomorrow's show. But
what are we talking about Tyreek Hill tomorrow?
You know what? I'm just maybe
Players
I'll write the
still have a busted wrist.
It's not. I've only talked about him 2 shows in a row. And here's the thing about Tyreek Hill. Not only is he, do I find him to be the most interesting player in fantasy this year because he obviously has this huge upside, or he's shown it. I think he still has it. Maybe you guys don't. But if he gets back on track, it's going to have a domino effect on other players that we're going to invest in. Probably not Achane, but maybe like fewer catches, I would say. But definitely it would hurt Jonnu Smith, and it would keep Jalen Waddle from breaking out. And it could catapult Tua into close to must-start conversation. So I think he is so interesting, not just for him, but for what he would do to the rest of the Dolphins offense, which is an offense that I think you want a piece of.
I know what we can do for tomorrow's show.
Okay.
For Tyreek Hill. Players who disparage other players.
You mean you mean like hold them back?
Well, no. Do you hear what he said about Travis Hunter, right?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh, we'll save that for tomorrow. There's
Yeah, and the other reason why I want to draft Tyreek Hill is he's just such a good guy. I just want him on my team. All right, let's take a break on fantasy football today. And when we come back, we'll read your emails. We'll be right back.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
This email is from Kevin. Dave seems to have taken a liking to warn people against drafting players too close to their ceiling. Obviously, there are limitations to any rule unless Dave refuses to draft any player at 101 on principle, which of course he doesn't. But what is the actionable element of this advice? Who are some high capital players who aren't being drafted too close to their ceiling? And how does that differ from just being at the end of a tier in ADP? Dave, you want to talk about that when you say, don't draft someone too close to their ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, but obviously someone's got to go 101, and it's the player that you think is going to be. I always try and take somebody when I'm picking first, someone who could be top 5 overall. And like Jamar Chase or Bijan Robinson could absolutely be top 5 overall. That's why I think they belong there. If you're in the Barkley camp, you think he can be good again, 23 points per game good, then yeah, you're taking him top 5 or top pick overall, no questions asked. I look, it's basically a game of value, and you're looking for players that have outperformed their ADP. And if you see somebody that you think can outperform where you're getting them in the draft, you're probably not drafting them too close to their ceiling. But sometimes hype will drive up a player's value. How about this as an example? We've talked about Ashton Genty a lot. We've raced to put him in the first round. Obviously, he's never played it down in the NFL. He is a man. He is a brick house. He is ready to go into the league. Should be able to do a lot of the things that he did in college and then some. But he hasn't done it yet. He's not on a great team. I don't know if the Raiders are even going to be top 15 in points per game this year. Are we taking him too close to the ceiling if he's a first-round pick?
I think if you take him in the top 5, probably, once you get past a certain group of players, then you could argue that for anyone, right?
I am at 6. I think it's a mistake. I think that's too close to the ceiling.
But who has a better case to be 6, right? That's the problem, right? So now you have to find someone who you're not drafting at their ceiling. If you put him 6, who would that be for you?
CeeDee Lamb.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
Here's an example. We get out of the first round. Someone in our draft drafted Jameson Williams in the 3rd round in a PPR league. And he might have a great year. It's really hard to see him finishing as a top 12 receiver in a PPR league.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you like him, that's just drafting someone at their ceiling. DeVonta, Dave, I'd have to say I don't know that this was a bad pick because it's just wide receivers were flying off the board. But you took DeVonta Adams 35th overall.
Not close to a ceiling.
No?
We've seen him finish as obviously the top receiver in fantasy before, but that's a long time ago. Where did he finish on a per game basis last year?
Probably around this.
I've got him wide receiver 11.
Yeah, I've got him at 10. And I don't want to draft him as the 10th receiver off the board. But I can't rule out that he finishes between 10th and 15th among receivers on a PPR per game basis. In the Rams offense, playing in the slot, red zone threat, still moving well. Stafford's healthy. Like I know DeVonta breaks the rule as far as age goes, but I still think he's got it. And he was 4th at his position in targets per game last year. I don't think that falls off a cliff. I don't think he pulls Allen Robinson, where Allen Robinson went to the Rams, and it took me one game to go, oh no, this isn't going to work. I think Adams is worth that round 3 pick, but I think a lot of people are going to get him in round 4 because people are worried about him falling off the age cliff.
Okay. Yeah, you took him as wide receiver 16. He was wide receiver 12 last year.
Right.
Being wide receiver 12 with the 4th most targets at the position isn't the most encouraging thing, but okay, so you don't agree with me there. But all right, hopefully we've answered that question. And we'll go on to our next one. And this is from Davin. Davin has a very derogatory nickname for Cam Scattaboo. He's calling him Cam Scatapoo. Jamie Davin says, how come all the fantasy analysts love this guy? All I see and hear is Cam Scatapoo this, Scatapoo that. Why the disconnect between fantasy and real NFL teams?
I guess the disconnect would be where he was drafted.
Yeah, I think so. Usually round 4 picks do almost nothing as rookies. And so this is what he's talking about, I guess. So
I guess the question would be probably better served for somebody who has Scattaboo ranked ahead of Tracy. I don't know if any of us do. There's an easy path to him having success, though, because, Tracy did some good things last year on a bad Giants team. I think he's got a chance to be better with the Giants being a better team this year, especially better quarterback play. But it's not like he's an established collegiate star, coming off an established rookie season. He's could just be a guy, and Scattaboo may be just a better guy. So I don't think he's an elite talent. I don't think he's got the chance to be an elite fantasy running back, but he certainly has a chance to be in that, top 30, 24-ish range of a number 2 running back if he's better than Tracy and gets that volume. So I'm not overexcited about Cam Scattaboo by any stretch, but I do think there's an opportunity for him to be drafted as a hopefully 4th running back on your team, and could eventually work into your starting rotation if he ends up being the starting guy for the Giants.
I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that so many people came into this draft thinking this could be an historically great running back class. And so there are more running backs that got drafted later that we are excited about. And there were some pretty good, maybe even great fantasy performances from 4th round rookie running backs last year.
It was Bucky Irving last year.
Bucky Irving was a 4th rounder. Isaac Garendo had a good little run for a few games. A lot of people were excited about Ray Davis coming into last year, who was a 4th round pick and had a much better running back in front of him.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Davin. Be nice. Cam Scattaboo didn't do anything to you, so chill there. This is from one of our oldest fans, Joe. Where's he from, Dave?
He's one of our oldest fans. He's from the Tolatine Center in Olympia Fields, Illinois. That's an old folks' home. People. Yeah, I'm not drafting anybody in their 80s or their 90s in fantasy this year.
I don't know why I'm reading.
You just said you like DeVonta Adams, though.
He's not in his 80s, Jamie. 32.
NFL years.
Johnny Airport, by the way, just comment in the chat, says, I stand corrected on my round 4 rookie running back take. No, I don't. Most rookie running backs drafted on day 3 do nothing. Most rookie running backs drafted, honestly, in round 3 or later do very little. And round 2 or later, it usually takes at least a few weeks. I don't know if I should read this email, but I might as well.
I definitely don't think you should.
Well, I'm not going to read the name that he put. But Joe, I like this because Joe, who says, Dear Terry Benjamin.
Oh, he said something good about you after the inappropriate comment. Okay, yeah. I see.
Terry, Benjamin, Garth, and Noah. Does anybody get that? Terry, Benjamin, Garth, and Noah. So that would be Wayne's World.
Garth's a good way. Yep.
Yeah. So he says, I've been listening to the podcast as long as I can remember, and Adam relentlessly drops absolute dimes of movie quotes, well-timed and often missed. I think I'm batting 1,000 on catching them all, and they usually have me rolling. For God's sakes, just give me the damn number. So if he says, if equating some of your favorite movies to players, who and what would you choose? My favorite movie ever is Dumb and Dumber, and I'd equate this to my continual drafting of Kyle Pitts. So I didn't really get, I don't know how to equate a movie to a player, but I did want to read this email because I needed it a little bit. I needed the ego boost.
You would equate Tyreek Hill to Dirty Dancing.
Oldie but goodie, underrated. And, maybe I'd equate it to like Footloose because it had like a revival, there was a remake. Okay. So I don't know if you guys have any movies you'd like to equate to football players, if I can think about that.
Well,
I like
let's see.
Dirty Dancing one.
Jamar Chase is the best receiver in football, so Jerry Maguire would be that.
The best love story? Yeah, I get it. And you love Jamar Chase. All right,
I think this email has already served its purpose. You got to say that somebody said something nice about you in an email.
Thank you. I needed it. All right, this is from Chris in Portland, Oregon. With the explosion of best ball over the last few years, I'm wondering if we can get more content about best ball, especially at this time of year when it's predominantly best ball and dynasty drafts going on. And secondary question, I'll come back to the secondary question. Why don't we read best ball? Or Heath, why don't you give us some best ball advice?
Well, I'm pretty much covering, like he said, it's all best ball and dynasty drafts this time of year. And I'm pretty much stake my claim on the dynasty side of that equation. So I took a pretty big step back from the best ball that I used to do. I think Jamie might be our best ball drafter now.
I've done 2 already. And it was funny. I did one the night before. This was on Underdog. I did one the night before the George Pickens trade. And I drafted CeeDee Lamb in round 1. So I did a Cowboy stack. And got Dak relatively late. I did, and just part of this draft, like a Brown stack as well. You could do that so cheap, because if you're going to buy into Flacco, he's like the 2 that I've done so far, I've gotten Flacco late, and both these drafts I've done with Njoku and Jeudy shares. And the reason I bring that up is, that's just an easy way to try and, maximize your success is getting, these stacks of players. It's really the only format I think you really want to go heavy with stacks. And there's so many creative ways to do it now, with how these, quarterbacks are performing. So you don't have to necessarily invest in, the early quarterbacks, the taking the quarterbacks early, but we could certainly spend more time about it when, if we want to plan this out. But yes, there should be more best ball content that we discuss here as well.
Yeah. And did I tell you guys my my best ball story about how I prematurely claimed victory last year?
No.
Yeah, we were talking. It was week 18. It was like Tuesday of week 18, and fantasy championship had just wrapped up. And we were talking, oh, how'd we do this and that? And I was like, oh yeah, I was like won this league.
Oh, it was a flex league.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, and I won the 14 team best ball flex league with all these industry experts. That league went through week 18. But I won it anyway. But it was close. It was close. But I prematurely claimed victory on that. But that was really stupid of me. All right. The second question was, outside of the top 100 picks, which running back in a best case scenario could you see pushing for a top 12 finish? Wow.
With injury or without injury?
Ooh, I guess you could give one of each.
I'll give you one without injury, but a guy missing, Ray Davis.
Oh, with the holdout.
Yep.
Top 100 picks. That's a lot of picks, man.
Jaden Blue.
Durando?
It would have to be Jaden Blue, non-injury. It's the only thing I can think of.
Where's Javonte at?
If he's in the top 100.
Is he?
Well, especially after yesterday, Dave drove his price up to round 5.
No. He went in round 8 in our latest pick. I can look at the consensus rankings, but I think he's like a 90th ish.
Garendo, Mason, Tootin, Davis.
Mason's a good one if he's that late. I think
Yeah.
Tootin's passed Bigsby already and may pass ETN soon. So
Javonte, I'm sorry, Heath. Javonte is 114th in the consensus rankings right
There you
now.
go.
I was just looking at our
there's the answer.
There's
All
a
right.
lot. This position's gotten so much depth to it this year.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be great depth. We'll find that out as the season goes on. But, with this draft class and pushing some of these guys down, like there's still going to be great value and it's not in this range, but Ramondre may still end up being valuable. Rashad White may still end up being valuable. Najee Harris may still end up being valuable. Like these guys all got pushed down because of the draft picks or players that have passed them on the depth chart, but they're still going to have some pretty prominent roles and may surprise us, unfortunately.
Dude, all J.K. Dobbins has to do is sign somewhere decent, and he might give you half a year
Or
of
Chubb.
must-start production. Chubb, too. He's got to be right. You've got to see that first.
Anybody want to start this from Johnny again? Anybody want to start up a league that uses Acer stats for scoring? Each week you get to cherry pick your stats to give yourself the best possible score.
Everybody wins.
That's awesome. All right, Thomas from Rhode Island. Dear Herschel, Russell, Deshaun, Trent, and Ricky.
Russell's
Worst
the
trades
one.
ever?
Yep. Herschel, Russell.
Deshaun, Trent, and Ricky.
They're all bad trades.
Who's the
We got the
Trent?
Ricky Williams Saints
Oh,
trade there.
Trent one is the Trent Richardson trade.
Trent
I think
Richardson
you're right.
trade. What are Russell and what's Russell?
Hello,
Broncos trade.
Seattle to Denver.
Oh, that Russell. I was thinking running backs or whatever. In Deshaun Watson, obviously. Okay. 10-team PPR Superflex Dynasty League. We start 3 receivers and 2 flexes.
Hello.
I traded away a 2026 mid-second round pick and Khalil Shakir for JJ McCarthy. Again, it's Superflex Dynasty. And then I drafted Sam Howell with in the 2025 draft. I guess, to protect McCarthy. What do you think about this?
A+.
Love it.
Cool.
Agreed.
This is from Andrew. Where's he from?
Boston, Mass.
10-team, 6-point per passing touchdown league, PPR, 2 wide receivers, 2 flex. Should I keep Jaden Daniels or Chuba Hubbard as my last round pick?
How many teams?
10.
10 teams.
Daniels.
I agree. Especially
Yeah, I think so.
if
I've
you
got
keep
Chuba ahead, but in 12 team, but in 10, I'd take Daniels.
If you can keep Daniels for a late pick forever, or just even if it goes up by a round or 2 each year, as long as there's no like strict time limit, easy answer, Daniels.
All right. This is from Mike Sanda in Warwick, Rhode Island. Ooh, we're getting into some semantics here. Subject, ADP. Should we use higher and lower or earlier and later when discussing? So he was saying that the only way to be clear is to use, I think he was saying to use earlier or later. Do you think it gets confusing if you say someone has a higher or lower ADP?
No, but earlier or later does make more sense.
So if I said to you, Jamie, player A has a higher ADP than player B, which one is being drafted first?
Player A.
So a higher ADP means a lower number.
Right. I would have said
Yeah, I
player
mean, I don't think it's confusing for people who have obviously discussed this for a long time, but to his point, earlier and later does make more sense.
Have we been using higher and lower?
I think, well, I was saying, I responded, this was a thread on Twitter. I responded to it. And I did say that we do use risers and fallers. And that feels very obvious to me. Like if your ADP is rising, that means you're going earlier in drafts. But then I thought about it, I was like, well, maybe we should just keep using earlier and later. Heath, I feel like you have a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
I see the look on
said
your
it.
face.
I have said it.
It could be a little confusing. I'm confused right now.
Well,
I was not
You just
confused
go take a
before the
shower
email
and
was
think about
read.
it.
Yeah, right. I will think about it in the shower. It's a good point. Okay. If I haven't recommended Your Friends and Neighbors yet on the show, I strongly recommend it. You've got 3 days to catch up, or 2 days to catch up before the season finale. It's terrific. And I'll leave you with that. Okay.
glad you
Thanks,
did.
guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today. See ya.